Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Don't Do It Alone, Engage the Right Partners to Plan for Your ECIDS. We're happy to be here with you today. My name is Kathy Hebler, and I'm part of the SRI education team, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. We will be recording the webinar, and the recording will be available. If you have to leave early, or if some of your colleagues were not able to make it, there'll be another opportunity to get the information. There is, for maybe put the Mentimeter link one more time in the chat, there's a Mentimeter link in the chat. If you would sign on there and tell us one thing you are hoping to learn today while you are here. Next slide, please. As many of you probably know, this webinar is part of a series that SRI Early Childhood State Systems Building series that we are doing here. We are up to Thursday, May 4th. This is the third in the series. There is one more coming up in June on engaging families by supporting decision-making. I hope you'll be able to join us for that webinar. We also wanted to remind you that all the previous webinars, the two previous ones, the March one and the April one, are available on the SRI Education news site. And that link, I think we can probably put it in the chat and we'll show it later in the presentation. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Okay, next slide. All right, you are in for a real treat today. We have Howard and Rebecca who are going to present to you. We know many of you, and many of you know them from the work that we did with you as part of the National PDG B5 TA Center. At SRI here, we remain committed to helping support your early childhood systems building work. And we're really excited about this opportunity to spend time with you today, looking at data system, particularly some of your ECID partner and use case issues. Let me introduce our speakers. Howard Morrison is a leading expert on use case-driven data system planning. Howard has extensive experience in interagency data integration and use, data governance, data sharing agreements, constituency engagement, and state systems. Rebecca Valencias is a seasoned technical assistance provider, many years of experience. She has extensive experience in early childhood, in special education, in data governance and management, and communication and outreach at the federal, state, and local levels. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate the words of welcome, and I am super excited to be here with all of you today. It's really a privilege to be able to spend this hour together. So you've just heard a little bit about Howard and me, and we're interested in learning a little bit more about you. If you haven't yet had a chance to share one thing you're interested in learning about during today's session, please do feel free to click on that Mentimeter link in the chat, and you can add your answer to the growing lists of things that we are seeing there. As an FYI, I see that we have about 30 people on the line today, and only 7 folks have answered. 8 answers have come into the Mentimeter. So we are going to be using this link throughout the session today. Please do click on it and share your feedback, because we are hoping to meet your needs. And the way that we will be able to do that is to have a little better sense of what you are looking to learn today. So some of the answers that have already come in are around partnerships, who the right partners are. So that's great, because that's we talk about right in the title. As a way to thinking about strategies to build those partnerships, and how to use those partnerships to support systems building. So great, keep those answers coming. As you are also sharing the one thing that you were hoping to learn today in the Mentimeter, please do feel free also to add your name and role in the chat. So looking forward to seeing those introductions roll in as well. So we'll give a second there. So looking for name and role in the chat, and then those answers can keep coming in the Mentimeter throughout as we go along. So just also want to flag for you all today that we are actually going to have a very specific topic of focus for our conversation. So if we want to take a look at the next slide, you may already know, and you may already have heard, and you may have read in our session title and session description that creating an integrated childhood data system. So let me make sure that I'm saying it in the right order. Creating an early childhood integrated data system, because we're going to be using the acronym throughout, is a collaborative, multi-year, multi-step process. So getting input from those who are impacted by the ECIDS, those who contribute to it, right, and those who are served by it, it's critical to the success of, as this collaboration ensures the system's priorities, strategies, and execution align with and are responsive to the expectations and needs of those involved. So one proven strategy for making sure that this collaboration and this alignment is happening is to do this co-development of a use case. So that brings us full circle to why our focus today is really how to leverage your use case to engage the partners, those who are the key players in this process, in the development and or expansion of your early childhood integrated data systems. One quick point to note here is that historically, what we are about to describe to you today has been referred to as stakeholder engagement. But for the purposes of this conversation and our conversations moving forward, we refer to these key players not as stakeholders, but as partners. So it's the parents, the researchers, the advocates, the local programs, state agencies, and the policymakers who really need to be involved in this process. So last point to make here is that we do want to, again, make sure that we are addressing your needs and the reason why you've shown up today to the fullest extent possible. So please do feel free to share your questions in the chat along the way. If we don't have an opportunity to address them today during our time together, then we will make sure to follow up afterwards. So thanks for all those introductions in the chat. Keep those things that you're looking to learn in the Mentimeter coming. I can drop that link again, and then we will move on to our next part. So exactly, just to do a little bit of level setting as we are all kind of getting grounded in our conversation today, what is an ECIDS? So an early childhood integrated data system, which is why it was so important that I said it in the right order in the first place, collects, integrates, maintains, stores, and reports information from early childhood programs across multiple agencies within a state that serves children and families from birth to age 8. So typically data that are included in the ECIDS are related to the individual child, the child's family, the classroom, the programs and providers, and services that really look at the comprehensive care and education for young children. So just if you have more, if you're looking for more information about this particular graphic, we have pulled this from, you can see the site on the bottom of the screen, from a resource that I will drop the link to in the chat. And we're going to try to do this throughout our time together today to make sure that you all have the resources that we are accessing as we are sharing them throughout today's call. So what we've kind of talked what it is in ECIDS, and now, so what's the point? What's the purpose? And really, it's to focus on using, or the focus is on using an ECIDS as a systems building lever. So really looking at, again, what's kind of to the information that's on the screen, looking at that integrated cross-program data that can be used to inform decisions about early childhood policies, services, and education, and especially now more than ever in these unprecedented times as we really begin to understand the full impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This coordinated approach to interagency services that is providing timely and accurate information that we can use to improve access to programs, to resources, and to supports as we continue to actively plan for and prepare all children to experience success and reach their fullest potential. So as we take a look at what comes next, we want to hear from you again. So here's where this Mentimeter is going to keep coming back around. So you can feel free to leave your browser open, or you should be able to hit refresh, or there should be a little pop-up that comes up that says the presenter has moved the information. But just looking for you to take a quick answer a quick question around if your state is currently working on an ECIDS. And we are actually going to take a quick look at the results that are coming in. So again, please feel free to use that Mentimeter link. Thanks, Sierra, for dropping it back into the chat. Got a number of folks on the line, so looking for some more numbers in that poll. So far, it's sort of a neck and neck between yes and not sure. This is a good place to be then, because we're going to be looking at trying to provide you with the foundational information that you need if you are new to this work, but then also differentiating and providing some resources and content and sharing some lessons learned along the way if you are in different, if you're a bit more advanced in the process. So far, we're still at that split between yes and not sure. And then we have a kind of in the chat. So that is great. Again, this is all good. You're in good company. So one more quick question while we have you here. Nope, that's the wrong question. We're not ready for that yet. So don't answer that one yet. Hang on to that. I got a little bit excited and jumped ahead of myself. So really thinking about the fact that developing an ECIDS is a journey. And so as you've heard, as you may already be familiar with, as you may already know, that this is a process, it takes time, and there are a number of different routes that you can navigate to get there. So let's take a closer look at the multiple components that might be involved in developing your ECIDS. So as we think about purpose and vision and planning and management and data governance and systems design and data use and sustainability, it's critical that we think about equity considerations across all of these components, as well as engage our partners, those key players that we referenced earlier as well. And so one big point to note here is that this process doesn't necessarily need to be linear. Again, we talked about at the beginning that this is a journey. People take many different routes to get there. And so it's really thinking about where does it make sense to get started, and then how can you move forward? So again, not looking for you must do all of these pieces in this sequential order, but that these are the components involved, and we want to make sure that somewhere along the way that you are addressing them and you're articulating your purpose and your vision, so that way that can help inform or refine management, governance, and your design as you're thinking about how you want to use the data, and then what does that look like in terms of sustainability and how that's going to extend and last over time. So also noting that this is from another resource. I'm happy to drop that link in the chat as well, so that way you will have that. Again, trying to make sure that you have all of the information that we are sharing from the resources, so that way you can help make some connections to those pieces, or we can help you make some connections to those pieces as well. So that was from the Early Childhood Integrated Data Systems Toolkit. So a couple of things to know before you go. And this is really bringing this point home right back around again, is that realizing that the development of your ECIDS takes time, and that in some cases, states have taken 3 to 5 years to really kind of work out what this looks like for them and to put this into practice. There is a great podcast that I will share the link to where New Jersey talks about the creation of their ECIDS NJ easel. And they talk about the phased approach that they use to get there. and how they engaged partners along the way within that phased approach. So I'll make sure that that link gets dropped in the chat for you as well. And it's really, you'll see all of our early childhood policy matters podcasts on the page, with the New Jersey one that I just referenced at the top. The other thing is that we can think about that again, this is a collaborative process. It takes multiple partners across stretches of time. And so thinking about your existing resources and whether or not new resources need to be identified. And so while many states are prepared to facilitate this process and dive right in, there are some states who have engaged external consultants and organizations like SRI and others to support them in this endeavor. So that's always something to keep in mind as you're thinking about your journey and planning for your journey. And the other thing, once again, is that this is not a one-person endeavor. We are looking for multiple individuals that you can really have as kind of champions for your ECIDS and creation of a core team. So just as the development of your ECIDS or the expansion of your ECIDS is not a one-person show, this webinar is also not a one-person show. So I would like to share the air and turn the microphone over to my partner in crime for the next few minutes, Howard. So take it away, Howard.
Great, thanks so much, Rebecca. So I wanted to start with talking about leveraging a use case, and there are many variations to use use cases, and often many of them are more utilized on the technical side. So throughout this presentation, I will be referencing one I developed with my ECDataWorks co-authors, and this really focuses on the programmatic perspective, so from the program area side. So there are other use case examples that organizations and different entities have developed. One of our TA centers, the DAISY Center, has created a DAISY linking toolkit, which includes an example template use case, and you can find that in the resources, and we'll share that later. But let's start with kind of an overview, so kind of the big picture of what is a use case? And so why start with the use case and the benefits? So, why start with one? It's a great strategy to be able to clearly define your information needs and analytic design. So what is it? The use case describes the information needs that's in response to the early childhood priorities within the state. And so this includes refining specific key policy questions the analytic tool could answer, defining the purpose for integrating data, informing the planning for the integration of data elements from the different program areas. But then there's also a multitude of benefits of the use case. So some of those are articulating and documenting the information needs of the intended users. So here you might have identified key policy questions, and this could be, are children birth age to 5 on track to succeed when they enter school? Big question. And have they identified childcare directors or Head Start directors as the intended users? So then thinking about a benefit being the alignment of the policy questions with the decisions and actions. So this is ultimately ensuring there is alignment from the policy questions identified to your state priority and goals. And this might be goals or strategies and priorities that are included in your state strategic plan that many states are working on or revising. Another benefit being early identification of the access and functionality. And so this will allow you to communicate the level of access needed for your data and how you might want to see that visualized. So whether you need the data at the state level and how might you be visualizing that in a chart or a graph, etc. Also, prioritization of data elements. So an example might be that you've identified that you're going to need specific data from certain data systems, and you're going to need X, Y, and Z data elements. Another benefit is being able to communicate the outcomes to your leadership, being able to show that a use case is a shareable document that succinctly shows what you're trying to accomplish, the actions that you're going to take. And then lastly, the last benefit really is being able to engage with your technical design team. So this gives you a clear, concise document to begin those conversations. So now we want to do a quick poll here. So how have you ever developed a use case? So that's our poll question to start. We've got kind of a neck and neck for yes and no. Not sure. All right. Good number of no's, so that's good. That we can provide some good context and information here to share. And great that we've got some that are here with some experience as well. Okay. And now let's talk about how would you describe your skills or use case development skills. So those that have responded previously, respond to those. I'm a legend, I'm a rock star, I'm a B-list celebrity, I'm not even on the leaderboard. Okay, we've got a good range, good kind of distribution of across B-list, and I'm not even on the leaderboard here. A few more coming in. Okay. Great. Okay. Wonderful. Oh, okay. Good balance there on the numbers coming in, and I think we'll have some great insights to share so we can move from not on the leaderboard up to that B-list, rock star, and legend status. Okay. So I'm now going to talk about the use case components, and I'm going to start with the information needs section. So the first part, which is the information needs, includes the background information, which includes state or national context for the programmatic use case. And so when writing the background, you want to focus on why this topic is important to your state and how it kind of includes, how it aligns to those priorities. You'll also want to have a clear and focused statement on the goal that will really help with those that are actually developing the use case to align it with state priorities and improve its relevance for state policy decision makers. So states are often presented with multiple policy questions from policymakers, advocates, educators, and stakeholders at large. I'll talk about how to engage partners to prioritize this later in the presentation. And remember thinking about aligning those key policy questions to the strategic plan and priorities. You want to clearly define the user because this allows the use case developers the information they need in developing and creating the use case. And the actions expected really provide the decision for the audience and the user for the next steps. So once the data is available, how can they then use it? So this really communicates how the data will be used to improve programs and improve quality improvement. The impact section really should identify who will be impacted by the use case and what actions will be taken, and really should answer how this action impacts children and families. So on the functionality side, On the analytic design side, excuse me, the functionality of the programmatic use case is a critical piece to convey the different components required for the data visualization. So this will help when having conversations with the technical design team to determine the functionality that needs to be offered, the functionality that the use case includes, such as visualization, that includes filters, search functions, necessary links, graphs, and charts. So it's important to identify the access of the use case. So the technical design team knows which level to display and how they need to aggregate the information. This is also helpful to communicate to the audience and users so they know which reports are more applicable to them. So you also want to identify the frequency of the data being updated. So it's important for the program area staff and the technical design team so they know when the data collections open and close. The technical design team will know, what their effort is and making those changes and updating any reports as needed. So the use case will identify how often the data is refreshed. Is this done annually, twice a year, quarterly, or another recurring period of time? And then lastly, having a clear defined set of data elements. This allows the technical team to ensure the available information will be there to integrate. So the use case should include the required data elements, so the data sets or data systems that might be needed, and any definitions or options to display the information. So really want to think about two ways to utilize a use case. For states that do not have an ECIDS, this can be a great first step to begin integrating data across programs or across agencies. This can also help make the case for leadership to show benefits of integrating data. For states that do have an ECIDS, they may utilize a use case to expand their ECIDS. This could be to add additional programs or additional agencies into their existing ECIDS. All right, so we have another quick poll that we wanted to pull up. And so have you developed a use case to support building your ECIDS? So we've got 2 for unsure, 4 for no. We've got some changes coming in. We've got 1 yes. Majority no, and a couple that are unsure. Looks like the yeses are starting to come up a little bit. Got about 12 folks that have responded, but a majority there indicating no, they haven't developed a use case to support building their ECIDS. 2 saying yes, and 4 that really kind of are in the middle and unsure whether that has happened. Oops. And so have you developed a use case to support expanding your use case? Expanding your ECIDS, sorry. Wow, we've got a good number. Now about 5, a good high number there for no, and then 1 coming in is yes. So we've got mostly 6 no and 1 yes. All right, any other last minute ones before we switch back over? Okay, good context to know as we move forward. Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so I want to share a state example. Utah is a great example of a state with an ECIDS, and through support of ECDataWorks, Utah leveraged a use case to develop its community assessment tool. They developed the community assessment tool, or as they refer to as CAT, to focus on specific information within the CAT. So they're looking at eligibility and how that refers to population and risk factors. They look at access and how that refers to provider counts and capacity. And then they look at the impact of that information. So within the CAT, it really allows Utah to determine the distinct counts that they serve in a community. So some of the policy questions they're asking through the community assessment tool is, how many young children live in a specific community? And how many of those might be eligible for services? Are they eligible based on family income or specific risk factors? They have specific needs for services, such as parents that might be working full-time, and what services might be available in the specific community. So Utah provides a clear background on their website, the need for a community assessment tool, the policy questions and topics that are addressed. They also include the data needed to fulfill the tool and the actions to take once the user has access to that information. So they really leverage their use case and was transparent about some of those components on their website. Additionally, Utah talks about additional program that they want to be added as future features, and that a use case will help them and provide a method to achieve that going forward. And we had a much larger conversation with the Utah team in a previous webinar on programmatic use cases that we included in the resources section. So let's talk about the use case development process. So when designing analytic tools, it's important to engage partners. Ultimately, they are the ones using the analytic tools, so it must meet their needs, or ultimately it might not be used. So the process of developing use cases can really help around the conversation with collaborators, agency leaderships, and data teams. So you'll notice in this process, we've included two key icons. In steps 1, 4, and 5, and 6, you'll engage partners that are outside of your core team in leadership. In steps 2 and 3, this is more of an internal cross-agency review and discussion. So I'm going to talk through these 6 steps to designing a use case. So develop a list of state priorities. Here you are really thinking about identifying those priorities for the state. So that may be ensuring all children are entering school ready to learn. You'll then want to validate that with leadership and governance bodies. So early leadership buy-in is critical to the success and sustainability of a use case in the analytic tool and ECIDS. So you want to align that to your research agenda or list of policy questions. So this may be one, or this may be multiple questions. So you also want to create topic areas for potential use cases based on similar sets of questions or research priorities. So multiple questions that might be around access or quality or workforce or readiness. Then you want to think about how to prioritize those topic areas to help focus the use case. So identify which use case or use cases are of the highest need and impact. And this will be determined by your partners in collaboration with your core team. And then the last step being develop one or more use cases. And so here you're actually completing the sections and components of the use case, which I talked about in that earlier section. So let's take a closer look at engaging partners in the process that I just reviewed. So if you're a state staff member, you may have common questions that you've gotten asked year after year or month after month, and you may have documented those. However, it's important to engage partners at different levels to identify some of those key policy questions that they want to have addressed or asked so they can make good quality decisions at the state, local, or regional level. And so you may do this through focus groups, surveys, or leveraging existing early childhood councils, like an early childhood advisory committee or a subcommittee could be established. There are several policy questions that align to specific topic areas such as kindergarten readiness, workforce, special education. And you may do this as a core team in review with your identified partners for their input and guidance. So it's not best to tackle all of your policy questions at once. It's important to leverage your partners to help determine the most pressing areas to begin with, and then select 1 to 2 use cases to get started. It's a good way to kind of scaffold that information and need for multiple use cases. So generally here, you would start with the partners you engage at the state level and the decision makers that will be able to support the use case development. And then as a core team, you want to identify key partners that have subject matter expertise in the core content areas and engage them in the actual development of the use case. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a few slides. So I first want to talk about California. And California received support from the previous preschool development grants Birth to 5 TA Center to facilitate their state leaders to prioritize their policy questions and topic areas. So to start, California identified a core team to work on the process for developing their use cases. So they began with a long list of policy questions that had been compiled from their state leaders in different program areas that were really aligned to the priorities in the California Master Plan. So the policy questions were then coded to the topic areas and potential users. And then California identified state subject matter experts to serve as partners in the use case process. And so this included state leaders from CCDF and Head Start and pre-K and IDEA programs, research and evaluation representatives and IT leaders and staff. And so they identified partners and participated in a series of meetings so they could ultimately prioritize. These are the top 3 that we would like to move forward with actually developing a use case. And so the state is now in the process of developing 3 use cases around workforce, children with disabilities, and facilities, and have identified partners at the state, regional, and local level with specific knowledge and expertise in the content areas identified in each use case. So before we talk about developing and identifying use cases, I want to pause to see if there are any questions about the process for determining a use case before we actually dive into developing one. So we've talked about the process. Now we're going to talk about, we've identified the ones we want to create, then we'll go into the development. Okay. Well, have any questions, type them in, but we're going to keep moving forward so we can stay on track. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.
All right, thanks, Howard. So there we go. Thanks, Howard. So here again, we just want to reiterate, all right? So this is a process, right? This is a journey. You've gone through all of the initial pieces that Howard just walked through, and now you're getting to the place where you are ready to develop your use case. And so we're going to take a closer look at unpacking what that means. And so as we can see on the next slide, really, this goes back to the identification of the core team that Howard had mentioned earlier. And so you really want to think about, and I think this speaks to some of the questions that, or the things that you're looking to learn today that were in the Mentimeter about the outset of the call, really thinking about one person from each program or agency that's going to be, you want to make sure you have that representation here. Important to also have some folks with decision-making authority involved in your core team. That is obviously very helpful. We all know how that works. And then also, again, as Howard was sharing the template earlier that talked about your information needs and your analytic design, which we're going to take a closer look at, spoiler alert, in just a few seconds, you want to make sure that you're also addressing the technical expertise or those components that are going to be necessary as part of the development of the use case. So as we look to the next slide, and we've got our core team, and so here it is. Here is that template once again that Howard mentioned in the beginning of our conversation. And we do have the link that we put to the brief earlier. We can put that in the chat for you all again, so you can see both the template itself, and then here is really the completed example, because we all benefit when we see what things actually look like in practice. So here it is. The scoop here is that there's largely an elementary school principal and a CBO administrator. They're working together to understand that children, entering school in order to coordinate professional development and ensure teachers and providers support the needs of all children. So thinking again about school readiness, what is the background information that's needed? What's the specific state priority or goal that's set? And then how do the programmatic policy questions, the audience, the actions that are expected, and the impact relate back to that priority and to the goal? So then, as we're thinking again about these information needs and really having these strategic conversations to make those determinations and alignment across those buckets and those categories to make sure there's coordination and consistency for those components, then we're also thinking about the technical piece or the analytic design. And so again, completing it from the lens of the school readiness example. What do we want to be able to do in terms of functionality? Where is the access level going to be? How often, or what is the frequency that we're going to want to focus on? And then again, those specific data elements that are going to be required that we're going to be able to get us the information so that we can answer the questions that we're looking to answer. I'll drop that link to this tool again in the chat, so that way you can look at it in more detail as we turn back to Howard and more engagement around partners.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. So once you've gone through the process for determining your use case, you'll want to then identify relevant partners to provide their input on the actual use case development. So this is a critical step to ensure you've obtained input from a variety of partners to ensure this use case meets the needs of the intended user. And it also helps garner support for the analytic tool or ECIDS reports being developed. And so as a core team, you'll want to consider the following potential partners. And so a variation of state agency staff, whether that be at the Department of Ed, Health and Human Services, workforce agencies, information technology, different program areas such as childcare, Head Start, state pre-K, home visiting, the users of the analytic tool. And so this could be state staff, district pre-K directors, or local childcare directors, really a critical partner here. Advocates and leaders at early childhood organizations, researchers at institutions of higher ed, policymakers, parents and family organizations. So in the example of the school readiness use case, which you showed earlier, you may want to think about the pre-K directors, the childcare administrators, the Head Start Collab director, local and regional programs that have subject matter expertise around those topic areas. And be sure to include varying levels of partners being at the state, regional, or local level, depending on that intended users list. So once you have your partners, it's important to create strategic goals for engagement and pace the sequence so your partners can see the process and the small successes. So you want to think about differentiating opportunities for general learning from the engagement that might require specific feedback. And then also create feedback opportunities that kind of align to the skill set and role of each partner, which might vary depending on program expertise versus technical expertise. So let's talk about putting this into practice. And so you'll want to start by organizing a number of meetings, either virtual or face-to-face. And should begin the first meeting by setting the context around your goal and what you want to achieve, and indicate that you're going to be using a use case in guiding questions to facilitate the process. And so it's really important here to emphasize the importance of your partners and their role, as well as defining their role over a period of time and how long they might be engaged. And so the lessons learned kind of discussed in the last slide should really kind of help you think about that and what to consider. So actually during your meetings, you want to engage your partners on their input on reviewing and providing input on the information needs. So focus on the actions expected here and the impact. This is really critical for the program side and a little bit less critical for the technical area supports. You'll then want to think about reviewing and providing input on the analytic design. So focusing on the design, how you want to display and visualize the information. This is really where your technical partner will be critical and be a great asset in these conversations. So in between meetings, because this will happen over a period of time, you'll want to work with your core team and develop a draft conceptual mock-up of the use case. And so this is essentially a wireframe or an example of what visuals might be used, whether that's graphs, charts, or other variations. So you'll then want to review with your partners and provide feedback on that conceptual mock-up. So it's a bit of an iterative process to really get at what you're trying to achieve. So now you've gotten to the final steps of the use case process. So you've received input from your partners. Now you can finalize the use case. Your core team has made updates to the conceptual mockup based on partner feedback, and you can actually finalize the conceptual mockup. Your leadership has approved the use case and conceptual mockup, and you can now begin meeting with your IT partners, including their leadership, for actual product development. So just kind of want to talk about a few things about how to use and kind of apply the use case. This can be a great communication tool with your agency leadership, with the data governance bodies that you're going to be working with your partners and policymakers. So state staff may utilize this in policy memos to convey the information needs and the benefits. So just going to quickly talk through some of those examples. And so the agency leadership, this gives a good way to communicate the outcomes, how this is going to make improvements for the state and align with their priorities. The governance bodies, so identify the information and data elements that are going to be utilized. So the program area, to be able to have and engage with the technical design team and prioritize the data elements. The partners, so be able to have a finalized document to be able to share and communicate with them what is being worked on. And with policymakers, being able to share the benefits of the use case and how it will benefit children and families in the state. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca so she can talk us through some hot takes.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Howard. We have shared an enormous amount of information with you all in a very short amount of time. And so what we've attempted to do here is curate the short list of hot takes for what is really beneficial to remember moving forward. So again, as we think about this notion of identifying a core team and having champions for this work and leveraging those relationships, both those that are existing and those that you may need to build, that you want to engage in regular, consistent communication with your partners and with your leadership, and that really coordinating all of this takes time. Again, multi-step, multi-year, multi-partner process, and that around part of one way to help with all of this coordination and organization across time is really to use your kind of build this capacity to use the use case process to wrangle all of these pieces together so that you can ultimately make informed decisions about early childhood policy, services, and education for children and families in your state. So that really brings us, we can take kind of to rounding out the time that we have together today. It goes by so quickly from this perspective anyway. Hopefully it was informative and also passed in an engaging way for all of you. So just really thinking about in our kind of last steps together, we do want to take one last look. We have this kind of resources roundup slide for you where we have noted the various resources that we've dropped in the links to in the chat along the way. If there are questions, we do have a few minutes and you want to drop those in the chat, please do feel free. We want to make sure that you are getting all that you need to support you in this endeavor. So please do feel free to share those in the chat if you have them. Otherwise, we can, oh, actually, maybe I should just pause for 30 seconds and stop talking. So if you have questions, I'll stop talking to see if anything comes through in the chat. And then also we'll leave our contact us information. So that way, if you don't have questions right now and you do have questions moving forward, you will be able to reach out. I will be quiet. A copy of the chat, it's not available. Okay, if you are not able to access the chat, we can certainly see what we can do about that. We haven't seen a ton of comments or questions from participants in the chat as we've been going. We've certainly been sharing the resource links along the way, but that are kind of put together or curated, compiled on that resources roundup slide. But if there are other things that we can garner from the chat, we'll certainly be able to pull those and share that with you. So sorry that you were not able to access a copy of the chat. All right, so one last poll or questionnaire or feedback thing before I turn you back over to Kathy. Popped up in Zoom. So really thinking about what you knew about ECIDS before today's webinar and thinking about what you know now. How much would you say you have learned? And how would you rate the quality of the information provided in the webinar? That question comes first. Thank you to all of those of you who are answering the poll. Please do feel free to keep those responses coming. And as we round out the poll and close it, I will turn it over to Kathy. Thank you all for your time today. It was a pleasure and a privilege to be here with all of you. I look forward to staying connected in the future.
Hey, thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you, Howard, and thank you to all of you out there for joining us today. It has been our pleasure to be with you. Just wanted to remind you there is one more coming up in our series. And hopefully you have information about that and that we will be seeing you on June 8th for our Information is Key, Engaging Families by Supporting Decision Making. Next slide. And just to remind you all, I know there were a couple questions about where to get this. Rebecca put the link in the chat for how to sign up for the series. You also, if you go there, you will be able to see the recordings from webinar 1 and 2, and in a few days, you'll be able to see the recording from this webinar. And you can always follow us on srieducationnews.org. And if we don't have any more questions, see if anybody has anything, just give you a minute or two, 30 seconds or so. Okay. I'm not seeing anything. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you in June. Have a nice day now. Bye-bye.